Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon here, along with Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy. And, you know, we thought we could take it easy for the summer, and lo and behold, just the never-ending stampede of news just somehow comes up and bites us once again. Here we are. It's almost July, for crying out loud, and can't anybody just stay in a freaking conference anymore? We're going to talk about UConn leaving the American and a lot more on this program. And we also have a guest, Philip Rossman-Reich of the Orlando Magic Daily will join us to talk about the UCF players who have moved into the pros, who are moving on, and specifically talking about the guys who've moved to the Orlando Magic for the Summer League, which is coming up. So lo and behold, we actually have a show for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, Eric, how are you fellas this flaming hot June afternoon?
It's not hot if you just spend all day indoors, Jeffrey.
Exactly.
See, there's the gif with the guy pointing to his head. You know, it's not hot if you stay inside. So. We are Black and Gold Banneret, the home of UCF Sports on SB Nation. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, as well as Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Let's go ahead and get started, boys. Oh, what happened this week? Oh, that's right. The American, as of 2020, is going to be, at least as of this moment, is going to be down one school. The UConn Huskies, actually it happened today. We're recording this on Wednesday. Earlier today, the UConn Board of Trustees officially voted to approve their move from the American to the Big East Conference as of the 2020-2021 athletic year. Now, a lot obviously has gone into it. A lot's been written about it. We're going to talk about it, at least in terms of the aftermath of this, and try and flush out some of the light that's floating out there in the ether. Because, I mean, in conference realignment, when that stuff actually happens on Twitter, like it's DEFCON stupid out there for everybody on college sports Twitter. So there are three real things that I want to get to with you guys. Number one is really how does this how does this affect the UCF and the American and across the sports? Number two, should the American expand in order to replace UConn at all? And number three, if so, with whom? So I think that's pretty much what everyone's looking at. But there's takes all over the place on this. I mean, we had a roundtable earlier this week. Murph, you were on there as well. Yeah, there's a lot of tribalism going on with this, really. But I'll start with you.
Shocking.
I know, right?
Tribalism in sports? What?
No way, right? But the story. Okay, so the story is, as of the latest point right now. So UConn is going to move to the Big East. All of their sports except for football. Football, they basically have no plan for. It's amazing
how dumb that sounds, and I know
they have no idea.
That statement right there says it all.
They have absolutely no plan. The MAC is not interested. Conference USA is not interested. The American report, according to several reports, is like, if you think you're going to stick around as a football only school, you have another thing coming. And so the plan, at least from some of the reports that I've read, Chris Vanini's been all over this with The Athletic, and we wanted to give some props to him as well as Brett McMurphy. Their goal is like, we're just going to do like what UMass does and be an independent and fill people's schedule, and play some body bag games here and there, which when I saw that, I was like, you really? Like, this is a school that let's not forget. Okay, now everyone's going to roll their eyes, but let's not forget, this is a school that's been to a BCS bowl. All right? They were good enough to qualify for it at some point. And now here they are. Probably, I mean, they're not going to drop down to FCS in that respect. So it just seems like they just. I wish I knew what the conversations were between UConn's athletic director and Randy Edsall about this. And Randy Edsall's been all over Twitter about this, kind of, putting on the good face, supposedly. But
credit to him.
Yeah, but
really being above all this nonsense.
Right, Brian or Eric, I'm going to start with you here. Like, what in the hell do they think they're doing?
I think they're clueless. I think they're incompetent. Again, this is what happens in a lot of administrations. In most universities have a lot of empty suits that don't have a clue what they're doing. They realize they're losing money, and we're not going to blame it on ourselves, so we got to blame it on other things. So maybe it's because we're not in the Big East and this or that, and it's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing what they've done to that football program. Forget how you feel about the football team. I know they're not very good, but you mentioned it. They have won in the past. And to treat them like this, like they don't matter, is just disgraceful as an administration. We forget this a lot of times.
How do you recruit with that? I mean, how do you get better? You can't.
The thing I don't get, if you want to make this move to go to the Big East because it you save money as far as travel because you can bus more and all that stuff, fine. And you want to say, you know what, we'll get rid of football because the majority of the reason you're losing money in most universities, the reason they are losing money, they don't want to admit this, but the reason most universities lose money is because football's expensive. Football's expensive. So if UConn would say, yeah, you know what, I'm sorry, financially we're just in a bad spot. We have to cut football, and we just feel that this is the better route, I would respect the decision. I say, okay, I shake my head. But this convoluted idea that they're going to continue to play football and schedule all these games is absolutely asinine and ridiculous. No administration in college athletics would do a move like this without keeping their job. They would all get fired. It's embarrassing. And I think what's happened is they have been influenced by their fans and probably some of their stubborn media that doesn't understand it's 2019 and 1999 it still use a typewriter instead of a laptop, that think, oh my God, your games are going to be streamed online. How dare you can't let that happen? And that nonsense, and they've made a knee-jerk reaction that think it's going to fix their problems, and it's really not. It's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid because their issues is nothing to do with the conference affiliation. Their issues have been with poor decision-making in that administration.
I agree with that sense, but I don't entirely disagree with. I don't entirely agree with basically saying that the reason why UConn is doing this is because they're stupid. There has to be some sort of real reason that led them to believe that they would be better off in the Big East than in the American. Now, I think that what they are acknowledging is we're a basketball school, and we're going to strengthen our strength. And Murph, I do want to talk to you about this because, and yes, UConn is a traditional basketball power. They won a national championship just recently as being a part of the American in 2013. But the Big East is not a bad basketball conference. I should point out the American is a much better basketball conference than people think. The Big East is pretty good.
Look, it's a good league. I mean, nobody's questioning that. But this idea, because I've had interaction, that the Big East is far superior to the American is laughable. And that's the problem. Don't use the American as the excuse there. Last season, the Big East was ranked 5th as far as RPI-wise, as far as the 5th best conference in college basketball. The American was right behind them at number 6. The reason they were behind them was because Tulane and East Carolina obviously hurt them, whereas the Big East has better, their bottom teams are better. That's basically the difference on that. There's not a huge difference. A huge gap that would be suggested would be if you said, well, it's the ACC and the Big East. That's a gap. The American and Big East gap is not big.
Murph, what do you make of this, especially on the basketball side? Because obviously basketball is ingrained in the culture of UConn. Is this just a confession that in the 21st century you need to stick to your strengths?
I think this is a sort of pining for the days of yesteryear, which you guys have mentioned, as if well, it was always better in the past, which is one of the great human fallacies of, things were always better in the past, when really all we do, mentally, is just remember the good times and X out the bad times, because really it wasn't better. We just don't remember it that way. But really, landscape has changed. The teams that teams like Syracuse that UConn has this great traditional rivalry with, they're not in the Big East. I mean, they're not going to go back to the Big East that they knew. And as you guys point out, that Big East is a fine conference. It's not a bad conference, but it's also not it's also not a Big Ten. It's not an ACC, and it's barely even better than the AAC. And then just talking about programs across the board where, the American's better in baseball, the American is better in softball, the American is better, I believe, in men's soccer, and then there's narrow differences between the two conferences, Big East and ACC and AAC and women's soccer. And
I got him right here. I tweeted this out earlier.
I'm reading your tweet, Eric. I'm reading your tweet.
Well, then give me credit, darn it. No, I'm just going to go ahead.
I'm going to. But no, Eric put out basically all the conference RPI rankings for every sport, and there's quite a handful of sports in which the AAC is ahead of the Big East, and in sports where the Big East is ahead, it's a very marginal difference. So, from top to bottom, program to program, the AAC is a better conference. Yes, they're not as strong in basketball, but it's not that big of a difference. And what UConn thinks they're going to re-enter back into is no longer existing. The Creightons and Xaviers of the day, those don't have the same gravitas as your old UConn and Syracuse matchups. And I should mention that there's a decent chance that the best team in either the AAC or the Big East is probably going to be Memphis out of the AAC.
Yeah. Well, just to remind everybody about the conference that they're about to go to, the old traditional Big East powers, basketball powers that are in the new Big East are the following: Georgetown, Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, Villanova. All right, so it's 5. UConn would make it 6. All right. The new-ish Big East schools that were from the previous expansion, and then from the big split in 2013, you have Butler, Creighton, DePaul, Marquette, and Xavier. So this is who they're doing.
Rivals.
Yeah, but this is what UConn's going to. To me, it's the square peg in the round hole. They're a big public university that's going into a conference that's filled with a bunch of small private Catholic schools, and there are different considerations for each of them. And my thing on UConn is, look, you don't want to be in the American. Don't be in the American. Fine. If you want to cut off your nose to spite your face in 2020 when college football is what rules the day, that's fine. Go do it. But then don't, tar and feather this conference on the way out that, by the way, the last 6 years gave you a soft landing spot and tried to elevate your program, the football program that was poorly invested in from the very beginning. And in addition, I think provided UConn some pretty good competition in basketball, in particular when you talk about Memphis, Houston, and even UCF over the past couple of years, as UCF has gotten better. There's this again in this UConn fan base and this seems to me to be more of a sort of a spiking the football thing of we're so glad to get out of the AAC, where the fact is they're not going to be in that much better of a place. One of the reasons, and Eric, I want to ask you about this too, one of the reasons that was talked about, there's a great article that was up in Medium. It was by, and you shared it, and I shared it from you, by Sean O'Leary, who actually is a GW grad who's in Washington, D.C., but follows the Big East very closely. 12 reasons why UConn will regret the new Big East. And this is one of the things that he mentioned was streaming is the future. Yeah, with the new media deal going to ESPN Plus, that put UConn in a spot with SNY, who covers their third tier rights. And with the way television's going, and with the way the technology behind television is going, where we might see much less and less bandwidth devoted to actual cable television, and eventually you'll just have one basic pipe where things are going to come through. It's going to be your internet connection. This feels like a very backwards looking move.
It's out of date. I mean, you and I were at that teleconference when they announced the American TV deal. Who was the most vocal people that was the most concerned about the streaming part?
Oh, it was all the UConn people.
Yeah. And then they were the one that we were concerned about this. I don't know.
What happens with SNY? What happens with UConn women's basketball?
They make like about $1 million. Great, congrats. So now they're leaving the league where they're going to make $3 million less. The America's going to make around $7 million in the new deal. The Big East makes $4 million a year. So you're going to take less money, a league that makes less money. You're going to have to pay the American at least $10 million to get out of here. By the way,
probably more because they're announcing
more.
this. Yeah. The AAC's deal was, I think it was a 26 or 27 month advance notice.
27 month notice.
Yeah, month notice. I mean, this is 12 months. So plus the $10 million exit fee. So if I'm Mike Oresco, I'm going to negotiate hard on this one.
Yeah, you don't give it in. And then, by the way, they got to pay $3.5 million just to get into the Big East.
Yeah.
So they're actually going to spend like $14 million, but yet they're in $40 million debt. Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea, just for the hope that an 18-year-old student at Storrs, Connecticut is going to somehow have memories of Ray Allen hitting a runner against Allen Iverson in Georgetown and get excited about Connecticut and Georgetown. I mean, give me a break. Listen, I enjoyed the Big East. Jeff, you obviously have ties to the Big East Conference. So I'll let you speak about it. But this is not the Big East. Can we stop with that nonsense? The Big East of old used to be arguably the number 1 or number 2 conference. It was them and the ACC. They were on ESPN Big Monday. All right, Bill Raftery was on. Jay Bellis, Sean McDonough, Mike Gorman before that. They were the must-see TV. They were the Saturday night deal on ESPN. They would get about 3.5 to 4 million viewers for their Big East title game. The Big East today is on Fox. No disrespect, but they're barely getting over 1 million viewers for their Big East championship game that's on free Fox. To put that in perspective, the American Conference has outrated them on ESPN. Like, what are we talking about here? This is not the Big East. And I got bad news for you. The Big East is actually being treated as a second league, according to Fox, behind the Big Ten. The Big Ten is the one that's going to get all the Fox attention. So you're going to lose a lot of ESPN exposure. For what? What? Like, that's the thing. For what? And you're making this move in the hopes of turning around your program, when in reality, the reason you might turn around your program is not the league or the teams you're playing. It's the coach. If UConn was 22-6 right now, coming off a Sweet 16 year, are we having this conversation?
Boy,
about lack of attendance?
That's a good question.
No, the answer is no.
Murph,
what are you gonna do?
Yeah, Murph, what does this mean for UCF men's basketball?
Well, it does mean they are losing at least a brand name, and I do believe that UConn, although they haven't been, I think it's way too early, obviously, to judge what Danny Hurley is going to do at UConn, but I believe that he's going to have that program successful. I don't. It's not like losing Memphis, or as even Kelvin Sampson brought up today in a tweet. Kelvin Sampson said the bell cow of the conference is Cincinnati, which I kind of opened some eyes. I think that was pretty funny. It was
nice little gem. By the way, real quick, it's funny how Cincinnati has prospered since leaving the Big East. How come they haven't struggled like UConn?
Yeah.
Just throw that out there. Continue, Murph.
But no, I don't know if there's I think it hurts a little bit because UConn still is a basketball draw. Like you said, it's a basketball school, and it's a solid opponent. I think they'll be better in the next few years. But it's not like, all of a sudden it downgrades the overall well-being of the conference, by some sort of magnitudes.
What about on the baseball side? Because we know how good UConn baseball is. Jim Penders, is going from a league that was very competitive for baseball to a league that barely exists for baseball. And you want to talk about a program that is serially, underinvested in. It's UConn baseball. They don't even have, Colin Sherwin from the Daily Stampede likes to bring up that they don't even have lights at their field in 2019.
Correct. I've been there. What
does this mean for baseball?
Well, it means that baseball is only going to have one season inside of UConn's new stadium, which will open next year and will have lights. So that's going to be unfortunate. But it does mean also that they lose an opponent that's made the regional six times in 10 years. That kind of competition you want in your conference. I know we can talk about how, it's nice to have easier competition you can beat up on and get wins against. But if you've got competition that you can really test yourself against and you have a real threat to beating, then you should want that sort of challenge. UConn brings the challenge consistently, even with their pitfalls with their stadium and their travel issues and how they don't play a lot of the early part of their season at home. But you still want them in your conference because they are consistently a pretty effective, successful high RPI team.
This is a question that I thought about too. I went ahead and I looked at UConn's future football schedules, and much like UCF, actually, they do not have any future non-conference football games scheduled beyond 2025. Now, we know for a fact that UCF is working on rectifying that. We have no idea that UConn is working on rectifying that. And now all of a sudden in 2020, they're going to have 8 more open dates that they're going to have to fill. Now, I look at that 2025 year, and I see a bunch of things getting ready to happen. I think that we all agree that it's around that time that the next round of whatever is going to happen. And I say whatever because we really don't know. Yeah. Is UConn laying the groundwork to kill football?
You mean
they might as well?
Yeah, right. For themselves, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so do you think? So I'll ask you, but Murph, we'll start with you. You think that in 2026, UConn football will not exist?
Yeah, I mean, what else? What other chance do they have? They can't leave. The Big East has assured them of that. They can't leave within 6 years without paying $30 million. So they're stuck in the Big East. So your only other chance, and no one else wants you. So the only other thing you could do is go FCS or independent, and I think at the end they're just going to go up in smoke.
What do you think, Eric?
I agree with Murph. I mean, to me, that's the only way this move makes any sense to me, because you're going to still lose a lot of money putting a football program out there, regardless of who you're, especially as an independent. Like, to schedule 8 games and the trial, get out of here. Yeah, I think that's a good date. I personally think they should kill it. Just get it out of the way now in a couple of years and let everybody move on. Personally,
amazing that a department's lost $40 million and now is looking at losing football. Really.
And that's not including, by the way, they're currently in a lawsuit with Kevin Ollie that could go up to around $10 million. I mean, they're not in a position to just give away money, but yet they did announce on Sunday on social media their new locker rooms for the football team, which was just hilarious that they would just announce that on Sunday. Yeah. So yeah, I'm with Murph. There's no reason to keep this football team. They're not going to be able to recruit anybody. Why would anybody go to that place to play unless you have no choice?
And that tweet sent out by the program announcing the new locker rooms with the video clip of the players seeing the locker rooms, and the tone deafness of that tweet saying the players got surprised this weekend. Like, yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, I bet they did.
It's a joke. It's embarrassing. And what's embarrassing is an administrating and an athletic department, you're supposed to watch out. They supposedly tell you they're supposed to watch out for your student athletes. Well, you tell that to those football players that made a commitment to there, and you basically throw them out like an old shoe.
Let me ask you about the conference now, and Murph, I'll start with you. Do you think that the American should expand to replace UConn, and if so, how should they do it? Should they stay at 11 for football, as has been reported? Should they go back up to 12? I'm not talking about teams they should go with yet. That's going to be my next question. But should they do it? What's the best option here for the American, Brian?
I don't believe it's imperative. I don't believe it's a must that you must replace them with someone else, because just to replace them with another program that is just to fill out a space, just to add sake doesn't really accomplish anything.
Right.
So I don't think to answer your question of will they go to 12? I don't know if they will, but I'm going to say they don't think that they don't need to think like they have to.
So do you think that they would stay at 11 for football and kill the divisions, or and add another non-football playing school?
I think you're more well versed than me on that, but I don't think they'll kill the divisions. I don't see them kill the divisions. So I guess that way they'll have to add a 12th. Because I think I see them sticking with that format.
What do you think, Eric?
I think you stay at 11 unless ESPN tells you that they want you to go to 12.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I'd forgotten all about that, and I wonder what UCF would want or ESPN would want them to do. Yeah,
because if ESPN, here's the thing. This is the problem. We get caught up, and I got caught up in it. Well, let's add this team, and what do they bring? Like I know you brought up in your article, you brought up in the forum about
not yet.
Dominion.
Not yet. We'll get to that.
But I'm going to use them as an example because I'm going to trash Old Dominion now.
See, I knew you.
Why would ESPN care about it? Why would ESPN want Old Dominion in the league? What that doesn't do anything for ESPN. They're not going to give you an extra dime for that. So to me, no, you don't add anybody in any league unless ESPN says, we think it's a good idea if you add blank as your 12th member, and if you do that, maybe you make an extra $1 million or something like that. Otherwise, you just stay at 11. Move forward.
Now the TV contract does state that ESPN can renegotiate if there's changes in the membership of the conference. Now, Brett McMurphy, I think, had reported that was largely a backstop just in case a school like UCF were to leave, and that UConn didn't really figure into that. But they may very well figure into that.
Well, they might. What they might do is instead of picking up the extra 600,000 or close to $1 million that you might get from UConn leaving, the ESPN is like, we'll keep that to our own back pocket if you don't mind, and you keep your $7 million. That might be what happens. Yeah. I don't think this is a giant step because it doesn't affect football. Really, it really only affects basketball. And let's be honest, you've mentioned. Let's be honest, the majority of this money is towards football. So if it was a football, like a UCF or a Houston leave, I think that's what they were renegotiated at that point.
All right, I'm going to go through a bunch of schools that have been rumored.
Oh boy, Murphy, I know you're fired up.
Yeah,
I can't wait for this.
For this, and you guys just give me a yay or nay. Don't feel like you have to explain each one. Like if you're just like no, just say no. But we've seen everybody under the sun. I mean, this is like I said, Twitter's in DEFCON stupid over this. Let's start with the name that seems to be on everybody's tongue at the top of the list, BYU. Murph, what do you think?
No.
Okay. Eric?
If ESPN says yes. No, I'm being serious. I think that's the program that I could see ESPN, and this is why. ESPN's actually currently I'm not even making this up. They're currently in negotiations with BYU to redo their deal.
Right, because BYU has an independent contract with them.
Correct, and from there's depending what you read, BYU makes about $4 to $6 million with ESPN, and there's skepticism about whether they're going to make that much because ESPN's going to want certain games to be on ESPN Plus. So I could see a scenario where ESPN comes to BYU and say, "Look, we can only get you 3, but if you join the American, you can make 7, and we might make it worth your while." Then if BYU is receptive to that, then they go to Mike and say, "Mike, hey, we got a team for you that I think you should add as your 12th football member that I think would really increase your value." Wink, wink, and then you sign off on it. That's how that happens.
We should note that BYU is an independent in football, but they are in the West Coast Conference and everything else?
Correct. No, the answer is no. No, you will never bring their sports. There's too many logistic issues with that travel financially and the whole religion deal where BYU doesn't play on Sundays. There's too many headaches. There's no way I see BYU ever playing in the American as in all sports.
But they could be a football only candidate, is what you're saying.
Yes.
They could do the Navy thing. Okay. Another school that has been bandied about as an all-sports, no football candidate is Virginia Commonwealth, VCU. Murph, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because you've got teams in that area. It's on the East Coast. They do have a basketball brand. So I guess in that sense, among the candidates that we have to choose from, I would say yes.
Eric?
No, I don't. First of all, I don't think the only way basketball gets added is if they decide, hey, let's just go 12 and 12. And I don't think so. I would be shocked if they add anybody for basketball, but I don't think it's VCU. Although they certainly have a good case, but they would not be my number one choice.
Army. What do we think? Eric, I'll start with you.
Hell no.
Being in a conference was a total catastrophe for them last time because they were in Conference USA in the late 90s and it didn't work out.
Fantastic point, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's point number one. And I'm going to give you credit for point number two because you asked this question to me when I first, Army, yeah, because, Pete Thamel just threw it out there. Oh, yeah, it's Army. And you brought up a great point. What happens to the Army-Navy game? And guess what? That's a locked deal there. Both sides will make a lot of money out of that game. CBS televises it. It's 2 weeks a week after the championship game?
It's the Saturday after the conference championships, which means if that was a conference game, you'd be playing it outside of. You can't do that. Now, Mark Daniels brought up an interesting thing on his radio show. He said that what you would do is you would play it as a non-conference game. Well, then Army and Navy would play in conference potentially during the year, and that just
stupid. Yeah,
it doesn't make sense to me.
There's too many headaches, and then the other thing is that would be another triple option team you're bringing into your conference. If you're from a UCF standpoint, do you really want to deal with two teams potentially winning the similar system? No, I think there's too many headaches, and you brought it up. We don't know if Army can flourish in the league. They flopped the last time they were in. I don't think they're interested either. So no, I would say hell no.
Yeah. Murph?
Yeah, well, one, they're not going to do it, and two, those are good points about just the fact that it kind of screws up one of the circled dates on the college football calendar for those who care about the sport is the Army-Navy game.
Yeah. I can't believe people are going back down this road again, but here we are, Boise State. Murph?
No.
No.
No, here's the thing. If you're Boise, why do you do that? You're making a lot of money. They have a sweet deal in the Mountain West.
Yeah, they get paid more than anybody else. That's right. Yeah.
And they've got a good sports thing going. I mean, their softball program has made the tournament. Their basketball team has been good. So they've got everybody in the same umbrella. Boise doesn't need this. They figure, hey, if we win the Mountain West, we're always going to be in the mix for the New Year's Bowl, and our other sports are benefiting from being in the same umbrella. So I don't think they would. I think they hang up.
Yeah, they're in the Mountain West for everything too. So, let's see here. Oh boy,
you're not gonna find one that's very convincing.
I know. Well, here's the roster of stupid that's been thrown around the internet. Appalachian State, Louisiana Tech. You guys can just go ahead and both say no at the same time. Appalachian State.
I say you can list them, and I'll say no in absentia. Like just it's a stamp.
It's more fun when the two. It's more fun when the two of you just say no at the same time after I name.
All right, fine.
All right, here we go.
For the podcast.
Appalachian State.
No.
Louisiana Tech.
No.
Marshall.
No. Hell no.
That's what I was looking for. Your guys are gonna Southern Miss.
I'm not as into Southern Miss as everybody else, but no.
Florida
Atlantic.
Florida Atlantic. No.
And what's ironic about all this? The American is basically right now. All teams in the American are going through what happened with the Big 12 did a few years ago, where they're like, no.
Yeah,
we're good.
All right, here's where things get a little more interesting, but not really. Charlotte.
No.
Georgia State.
Hell double no. I wish we had Stone Cold Steve Austin's just use him. Saying hell no.
Too big. But the markets, but the TV markets, Murph.
Yeah, they're near. I mean, really, this guy had a hand over the weekend. Like, if there's one school that's got that UCF groundwork of lots of got money and students and a good location. It's Georgia State. I'm like,
What?
Not now.
Maybe
First
in
of
5
all,
years.
money?
10 years.
Where's the money?
It's the way. Here's the other problem. We're in Atlanta, which has a lot of sports teams. The thing that UCF benefits from, there's only one NBA team and an MLS team, whatever. And Georgia State's competing with a lot of stuff there. So no.
Here was my pick, and I said this was at gunpoint. Okay, I am in favor of the whole don't do anything deal, but this was if you held a gun at my head and said invite a team for all sports, I said this: Old Dominion.
Okay, great. Good for you.
Yeah, congrats. Look, I know what you're going to say. They have some things going for them. Here's the problem. No disrespect. No one's going to get excited when you say, "Oh, Dominion." Nobody's going to get it. Like, where is that?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. ODU. What is that? That's not
come on.
move
If they were called Virginia, Virginia something like Southern Virginia, people would be like, "Oh, okay," But they have a funny name, so people are like, "Who's Old Dominion?"
I feel like, right. I mean, obviously, to help to beat Virginia Tech, it's not terrible. They're investing in it. If you forced us to pick an all sports, right? Because I'm assuming this would be Old Dominion would be an all sports,
including football.
If you force me to pick one, I'm actually going to go UAB, and I'll tell you why.
That was my next one I was going to ask you about. Go ahead, make your case.
UAB, and I'll tell you. UAB's because you're in Birmingham market, which if you look at the college football numbers, it is always among the top-rated markets for college sports.
But they're not the reason why.
Well, neither. I got news for you. Neither is other markets in the American. Like New Orleans ain't the reason why Tulane, that draws. But no, but it's Birmingham. Their football team has done a heck of a job with Coach Clark rising from the dead to a conference championship. They've actually spent money on the facilities. Their basketball program has tradition there. They've invested in facilities there. I think in geography they kind of make sense. You already have a bowl game in that region. For the fans in the American, it's an easy destination. That would be my pick. I'm not saying I would do it, all right, Murph. I'm just saying that if you forced me to pick an all sports program, I would probably lean towards UAB because I know that Birmingham market, you could tap into that like you do with Philly and Temple and New Orleans and Orlando. I think that could work a little bit more than Old Dominion, although Norfolk's not a bad market. And I think UAB can be pretty good at every sport. That would be my pitch if I had to go all sports.
I'm worried about the risk that is if the state of Alabama killed UAB football once, would they be willing to do it again?
That's the beauty, and that's a great storyline. UCF helps the program that Alabama tried to kill, and now you've got another ally to go after Alabama. Yeah. It's great.
By the way, I hopped online and I did one of those. You know how you can find like the geographic midpoint of like a bunch of different points on a map. And I plotted the 11 schools in the American and found out the geographic midpoint of all of them. And you know where it was?
Birmingham, right?
24 miles north of Birmingham, Alabama. Which is just, I couldn't believe it when I saw that. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
And I think the media would be supportive of that move because of the UAB storyline. It's Alabama. I'm not saying it's going to throw a parade, but that would be my choice.
What about?
I think you're right, Jeff. I think Old Dominion would probably be my number 2.
What about you? I'll hold you at gunpoint now, Murph. Who would you pick? You must pick an all sports thing, or what would you do? You could pick. I'll allow you to pick one for football and one for everything else if you wanted.
I get to pick 2 of something.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. I think I know where you're gonna go. You're gonna go BYU in football only and VCU and everything else.
Absolutely. I mean, you just read my mind, Jeffrey. It's like we have this sort of je ne sais quoi. Jeffrey. Yeah. I'm with you here. I'm with you. Well, you don't need to go to there's nothing that jumps out at you. So why should we say, you know what? We really need BYU or we really need VCU. Like we're kind of just tossing it around, but really, if you want to go gun to the head situation, for me, it's like no, just then don't worry about it right now.
Well, isn't it true though that if you drop down below 12 and you kill off the divisions, that
Right. I know they probably, and I said they probably don't want to do that. So who would they pick? We've listed a bunch of schools, none of which, and I don't care who you say, none of them are going to be like, that makes definite sense. They should definitely kill them.
Yeah, none of them seem to move the needle, as they say. But
BYU would be the closest. BYU would be, from a football standpoint, would help.
Right. But then my question then is, like, if let's say the American does decide to stay at 11. I think now, is it true that it's an NCAA rule that if you have a conference that has under 12 teams and you don't have divisions, that you must play a round-robin schedule in football in order to have a championship game? Is that true?
I'm not sure, Eric. You probably might know that.
I don't know if that's 100% true. The Big 12 obviously did that, but they had the number. So the American would have to petition to have the championship game with no divisions, 11 teams, and then they got to decide: do you go 8? Do you keep it at 8 games? Do you go up to 9 games? I find this eerie that Mike Oresco brought this idea up.
Yeah, me too. That's what I thought too.
A few weeks ago, which I think tells you he knew this was coming.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that he's going to say, you see, when they get together over lobster in about a few weeks, what did I tell you, boys? You want to revisit that little deal I brought up there? You guys thought I was crazy? I wonder. So clearly, if that was in Mike's head already, I think it tells you they could get done.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to play everybody. Now, I will say this, because you haven't brought this team up. My choice for basketball, and it's a place that Murph knows well, I would actually pick Dayton. I would actually pick, and I'm going to give credit to Brandon Hellwig of UCFsports.com, because him and I were talking, and he brought this up to me. He's done the research on Dayton, and things like that, and I did some research after he brought it up, and he nailed it. Their fans are phenomenal. They support every of their sports. That's a great market. That would be my basketball choice. They have a great fan base, kind of like Wichita State in basketball, not as good, but just as good. They're good at basketball. They're good at other sports. It's an easy place to get to. And from an Olympic sports standpoint, you could do Cincinnati and Dayton on a weekend. If you're volleyball, for example, or soccer, or whatever, you can do that kind of stuff. That would be my pick. I would go Dayton if I had to pick a basketball team, and I would probably go BYU if you can in football. And if you can't get BYU in football, then I agree with Murph. There's not another great exciting options, in my opinion, in football.
That Dayton pick is nice.
It's fine.
I'll go with that. I'm changing my pick from nothing to Dayton.
Thank you.
It's fine. It's fine. It is a private college, by the way. Dayton is. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, that means we can get that UCF Dayton baseball series, Murph. They got canceled early.
Hey!
Killed, huh?
Hey, man, make up for lost time. Make up for
Weren't they among the top teams in the A-10 in baseball?
Well, I don't know if they were this year. But yeah, but it would have been for the lost time when Dayton scheduled a series during their final week. Then we're not allowed to travel out of state for a non-conference series, but no one told them that before they actually scheduled the dang series.
It should be noted, Dayton has a football team.
Fantastic.
Yeah, they play in Division I FCS. They're in the Pioneer League. And last won a conference.
Do they play Stetson by chance? Do they play Stetson? We can scout them.
They last won a conference title in 2015, so not too long ago.
Great.
Yeah, that's about it. Chuck Knoll played for Dayton, by the way.
Hey, Dan Patrick's an alum.
That's right.
Come on.
That's right. So, all right. Well, I think we've pretty much beaten this horse dead to the ground.
Beaten this husky to a pulp.
God.
I love huskies.
I think later on.
Let's not joke about violence against animals. Thank you.
Oh well, you beat a horse.
I know.
We should discuss later on. I know we got to go to break and other stuff we got to get to, but which UCF team benefits? Which UCF team gets hurt, if any? I'm very fascinated from that standpoint.
Okay, I tell you what. Let's do this.
Basketball gets helped the most.
Yeah, that's why we sent out the video of Coach Abe doing a dance when the word came down. I tell you what. Let's do that when we get back from our next segment. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about UCF players in the NBA. NBA Summer League's coming up. 5 UCF Knights are getting the nod, and we're going to see them out in Vegas. And we talk about it with Philip Rossman-Reich of the Orlando Magic Daily in just a moment. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez joining you here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about UCF's potential NBA entrance this year. We have the NBA Summer League coming up with free agency also having just finished up. The Summer League rosters are announced, and joining us now, he covers the Orlando Magic for Orlando Magic Daily, runs the site himself. Philip Rossman-Reich joining us here for the first time on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast to talk a little UCF and NBA. What's going on, Philip? How are you?
Not too much. Just bracing myself for what should be a very, very crazy free agency period.
Are you heading out to Vegas?
I will not be in Vegas this year, unfortunately, but I'm sure the chaos will find its way down here.
I bet. So let's talk about the guys who have gone from UCF to the NBA. Nobody got drafted. First of all, was that a surprise to you that none of them heard their names called?
I think it was a little bit surprising. I felt like both Taco Fall and Aubrey Dawkins had kind of outside chances to be picked in the second round. I thought Taco would be really interesting, especially because, just there's something unique about him. I mean, being 7'6", 7'7", there aren't a lot of guys like that. But I think as we saw as the draft played out, centers were really devalued. I mean, a guy that was a good comp, I guess, for Taco was Bull. And a guy that I had in my top 10, going in the top 10, and several people had going in the lottery at the very least, slipped all the way into the second round. And so I think what became really clear is that the NBA valued, at least in this draft, guys with a lot of positional versatility and despite Taco being a pretty unique player, didn't feel comfortable spending a draft pick on him. Now, I think it was pretty obvious that he'd latch on somewhere. He was going to get a chance, but I think it was still a little bit surprising that a player that unique would kind of enter the open market. But, having said that, if you're getting picked at the end of the second round, it's better not to get drafted because then you get to pick which situation is best for you. And I think we'll kind of see that for Aubrey and Taco especially. I think they found really good spots for them.
Yeah, and Taco did find his spot with the Boston Celtics, but I want to transition real quick to Aubrey Dawkins because you mentioned, you and a lot of us have been really high on Aubrey, considering that he seems to have the right NBA game. Obviously, his pedigree speaks for itself. We saw the best of that in the game against Duke, where he was the best player on the floor going up against 3 lottery picks. He lands with the New Orleans Pelicans. Good fit for him? What do you think?
I think it's hard to say that he's a good fit with that specific team because they signed him to I believe what's called an Exhibit 10 contract, which essentially means we're inviting you to training camp. We're going to give you a little bit of extra money just to be in our camp, and then we're going to send you to the G League for a year. So if he does make the Pelicans roster eventually, the team that he joins might be a very different one than the team that he quote unquote signed up with. But the thing I really like about Aubrey Dawkins is I feel like he's the kind of player that can fit in anywhere. I mean, I think one of the hardest things to do as far as evaluating college prospects and figuring out how they fit into the NBA is most of these guys are their team's leading scorer, are the best player on their team in college. That's not what they're going to do at the pros. And so what I really look at is do you have skills that can support other players? And I think with Dawkins shooting, I think that his defense is pretty solid too. Not elite by any means, but pretty solid. I think that Dawkins would be a perfect role player. And honestly, I think that he would fit in with just about any team that would pick him. He's got good positional size, decent versatility, able to guard both wing positions. And he's got a good outside shot. And I think that's always a good place to start.
Philip Rossman-Reich joining us here from Orlando Magic Daily. Go ahead, Eric.
Philip, let's talk about the B.J. Taylor, who I think is going to be an interesting storyline. Local kid out of Boone High School. You covered him, obviously, up close at UCF. He's now with the Magic in Summer League alongside Chad Brown. But, B.J. Taylor, what's your thoughts on B.J. Taylor? And do you think he has a shot to make this Magic roster, a roster that, as you know, on a daily basis, one of the questions going into this offseason is going to be the point guard position at the Magic. Last year, the Magic signed Isaiah Briscoe out of Summer League. What's your thoughts on this B.J. Taylor Orlando Magic marriage here in the Summer League?
I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. I think there is a little bit of he's the local kid, let's give him a try thing. And certainly, if they're considering him for the Lakeland Magic, I think one of the things that we don't always talk about a lot is that, yes, those are minor league teams. They want to sell. And so if you have a kid from Orlando, maybe you can draw some people from Orlando out to Lakeland for games. But, I think BJ's a really, really interesting case. I mean, he's obviously a very gifted scorer. But the thing that I thought was always missing about him at UCF was his efficiency. I mean, I have his stats up here in front of me. His field goal percentage, his 4 playing seasons at UCF, 37.4% shooting, 41.4% shooting 2017, 39.8% shooting in 2018, 38.4% shooting in 2019. I know that he had the ball a lot more in his hands, and that's probably not what's going to be asked of him. But that scoring efficiency, I think, leaves some big questions, especially coming out of the point guard position. He's a scoring point guard, and I think from that position, you need to find some efficiency. The thing he definitely has working for him, though, is he's a pretty solid shooter. Shooting 35.9% for his career, 38.8% from three, 37.2% from three over the last 2 years. I think that will help him a ton. But the big thing with BJ is he's got to stay healthy, which he had some issues with at UCF, and he's got to become a better playmaker and distributor. And so, I think that's what he's going to have to show and prove himself at Summer League. And then if he can parlay that into a G League contract or a contract overseas, I think he can continue to develop his game, and then we can see where he is further on down the road.
I'm glad you brought up the Lakeland aspect of it, because I do think that's an underlining story here. If I'm the Magic, if Chad Brown, who I think is just going to be there for practice at Summer League, but if BJ can, prove himself to at least get a G League contract, I think that'd be a nice marketing business move for the Magic, for him to be in Lakeland, don't you think, Philip? Because they've had this Lakeland team, but there's not to say that they want buzz for it, but that would certainly help a little bit to have a local guy in Lakeland.
And I think it definitely would, and I think it would help. He's a scorer. You could put the ball in his hands, and it might take him a few shots to get there, but he'll put up points. And I don't think he's a selfish player. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's out there purposely kind of chucking up shots to get numbers. That's not who he is at all. But, he's got to increase that efficiency. I think he's got to become a better playmaker. And, yeah, I think the G League would be a really good place for that. It's not clear whether Troy Copain will be back with Lakeland next year, because the Magic didn't include him on their Summer League roster as one of their two-way players. And so I think that there's definitely some flux at the point guard position, both in Lakeland and in Orlando. And so I think that there's opportunity there. And really, it's just going to be about BJ showing what he can do.
Any chance, by the way, real quick, if he has just dominate, has an amazing Summer League, that he could be in a Briscoe and shock people and get a contract with the Magic and have a chance to make the roster? Or is that roster too much, too many things going on in that roster that there's no room for him?
I think there's always a chance. I think Orlando has that kind of third point guard spot open right now. Isaiah Briscoe's still recovering from injury. He's obviously not on the Summer League roster. Michael Carter-Williams' future isn't particularly clear. I believe he's a free agent this summer. So Orlando definitely has a spot on the roster for someone. They have two-way contracts to offer. So if BJ Taylor goes out there in the summer mini camp or in practice and really shows up and shows out, the Magic have proven they'll absolutely make that offer. Briscoe was a virtual unknown. They signed him before Summer League even started. That's how impressed they were with him. And so anything is certainly possible. I would say this, though. What really helps you stand out with the Magic is your defense and defensive intensity. Briscoe was kind of a wrecking ball last year in a good way, I think, in the kind of defensive energy he brought in. That's something that I think BJ Taylor is going to have to prove about himself, that he can be a better one-on-one defender at this level if he wants to make that step. And that's really, I think, how you stand out to the Orlando Magic's front office.
I was going to say, one of the guys that you mentioned, he'll be competing with Troy Copain, another guy from the American out of Cincinnati, too. I want to circle back to Taco Fall, because one of the fears, I think, in analyzing him in the NBA, and he signed with the Boston Celtics, another one of those Exhibit 10 contracts that you were talking about, is at 7'6", I think Danny White said this, which I think was true. 20 years ago, he's the number one overall pick, right?
Absolutely.
He has
surefire first round pick at the very least.
Yeah, at the very least. And his measurables during the combine compared very favorably to Yao Ming, who, when we look at super tall guys in the NBA, that's the guy that I think a lot of people look to and say that's what a super tall guy should be, more so than, say, what George Murison was, or even to a degree Manute Bol. But Taco, it's a different game nowadays, and the big man, the value of the big man has been significantly diminished in terms of what a traditional big man can do, especially compared to what they do at the college level. So how would or how should Taco Fall fit into any NBA team, be it Boston or whoever else might take a shot on him in the future, in order to adapt to the NBA game in the 2020s?
I think that the best comparison for Taco Fall and the kind of role that he can have is Boban Marjanovic of the Philadelphia 76ers, formerly of the LA Clippers and Detroit Pistons and San Antonio Spurs before that. Marjanovic is, kind of this modern marvel. He's 7'3", has ridiculously large hands. He's just this really big dude. And he's kind of the specialist. The Sixers would, kind of run him as the backup center, play him maybe 5-6 minutes at a time against bench lineups, and really just kind of change the game defensively. I mean, I think no matter, and I think we saw this at UCF, when Taco Fall's on the floor, both offensively and defensively, you have to take account for him because he's just so big. And honestly, I think what's most impressive about Taco Fall is not necessarily his measurables. It's that for a guy his size, he moves really, really well.
Yeah.
He has good mobility. I mean, it's not like elite mobility by any stretch of the imagination, but for a guy his size, he moves faster and better than you would think. He's not George Murison, like you said. He is, I never thought of the Yao Ming comparison, but yes, he kind of skews more toward Yao Ming, although I think Yao Ming was able to put on weight a little bit better than Taco can or has so far. But I think that's ultimately what Taco's role is. You bring him in for 5 minutes at a time, say early second quarter, and you just force the other team to think a little bit more, to not attack the paint as much, where he just gobbles up rebounds and is able to pick up rebounds and pick up shots that others wouldn't, and just finish really simple dunks, simple shots like that. And I think that there is a role for him in the NBA doing that. Obviously, the big thing is putting on some more strength and being able to withstand that pounding. But I don't think any team is going to ever ask him to fill out a role where he's playing 15, 20 minutes a game. I mean, he'll probably top off at 10 or 12, but he can be really effective in those 10 to 12 minutes per game. And I think I think teams can scheme around it and use him as kind of a short-term kind of game-changing center in that way, in the same way that we, again, see that Boban can do. I mean, I think the big thing with Boban, though, is he's been able to develop a little bit of a jumper. And that's going to be the big thing for Taco Falls. He's got to be able to extend his range and provide a little bit of value at the free throw line.
Yeah, and then also the other thing I was thinking about, I'm glad you brought up the fact that, his mobility was never really a problem, because I always thought that, people always talk about big men with their feet. How good is their footwork? Taco's footwork was excellent. I thought that it was his hands that he needed to work on more in terms of catching cleanly and not bringing the ball down where, shorter guys can swipe at it. Let me ask you this as we're wrapping up here with Philip Rossman-Reich of the Orlando Magic Daily. At gunpoint, okay, which of these guys would you see being on an NBA roster soonest?
I think on an NBA roster soonest.
God, I got you. I gave you a good one here.
I know. I'm like debating like two different things. Like, okay, let me answer the question this way.
Okay.
I think that if you're asking me who the surest bet is to make an NBA roster at some point, it's probably going to be Taco Fall because of the just the uniqueness factor. There aren't a lot of players like him, and I think he can be effective when you give him the right role. If you ask me who I think the best NBA player might be, I probably go with Aubrey Dawkins because, like I said, I think Dawkins has all the tools that you want in an NBA player and an NBA role player, and you can kind of plug him in wherever you want. You look at New Orleans especially, despite having Drew Holiday, Zion Williamson, and all the young guys that they have, I don't think we're going to expect New Orleans to really compete for a playoff spot this year. So there might come a time late in the season when, they're willing to call Dawkins up and sign him to a contract for the rest of the season and see what he can do out there. That's kind of what you want to do with your Exhibit 10 guys. So he's probably in a better position to make the NBA sooner. But I also think that, again, Taco's uniqueness is going to be intriguing to a lot of teams. If he can prove that he can play at the G League level, he'll get calls to be on a main roster.
All right. Eric, you got anything?
No, that's fascinating to me. You like Taco. Do you think Boston is a possible landing spot for him? You think it's going to be elsewhere? I'm assuming you think for these guys, do you think where they're at right now in the summer league teams, is this just a temporary thing and really their best shot's going to be somewhere else in the future? Or do you think any of these guys have a chance to stick with the team that they're with in the summer?
I mean, I definitely think they both have a chance to stick with the teams that they're with in the summer. I mean, obviously, both those teams like them enough to kind of sign them to Exhibit 10 contracts and kind of get them guaranteed with them, at least for training camp, and kind of keep them within their system. I think Boston, Boston's in such a weird spot. All reports are they're going to let Al Horford go. They've traded away Aaron Baines. They've kind of cleared the deck, and they clearly need a center. And for Orlando fans, Nikola Vucevic is certainly one of the centers that they're targeting. But there's an open center spot there in Boston. I don't think it's crazy to think that if, Taco looks really good and Boston feels comfortable with whichever other center they acquire, I think there's the potential that Taco could make the roster straight out of camp. I think that's completely possible. I mean, I think if Aubrey Dawkins has a really good summer league and shows up really well, especially on the defensive side, there's a chance New Orleans could sign him outright. And if they don't get, they're Exhibit 10 guys, so they'll go back down to the G League. Once you're in the G League, you're not bound to any team. Anyone can go sign you. So if you play really, really well, you can go off to any team that wants to sign you at that point. These teams don't hold their rights over them until the end of camp, essentially. And so, I think both these guys can be really impressive and impress teams enough that they'll be in the mix when the first round of kind of G League call-ups come up.
Good Lord. Could you imagine Bill Simmons on his podcast talking about when Taco Fall gets called up to the Boston Celtics? I don't even want to think about this right now. Philip Rossman-Reich.
It's not Nikola Vucevic, we're good.
Right. Philip Rossman-Reich joining us. Philip RR_OMD. Philip, that's with one L, RR_OMD on Twitter. Phil, are there any other places where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, the other best place is at OMagic Daily for all our Orlando Magic content, as I'm sure everyone loves to cheer on the hometown team.
All right, Phil, thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the summer as best you can, and Godspeed come free agency, all right?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks again to Philip. What a great follow he is about Orlando Magic news. He's absolutely fantastic. One other note that I wanted to pass along that I'm so sorry we forgot to mention here, but AJ Davis is getting a shot as well. Obviously, a year removed from being with UCF, but he will play for the Philadelphia 76ers in the Summer League. He was picked up by the Sixers just this week, in fact. So you've got Taco, you've got AJ, you've got BJ, you've got Chad, you've got you got Aubrey. There's going to be a lot of UCF guys to feast your eyes upon. So I'm going to put up a D League schedule to see if we can watch those guys, and we'll update some D League stuff every now and then from that. So congrats to AJ. Hope he gets a shot as well. So real quick, and Murph and Eric, you guys are back with me. I just want to ask you guys. I think I know the answer to this, but Philip brought up that good point about which UCF player do you think we'll see first, and then which one might we see for the most amount of time in the NBA. So Brian, I'll start with you. Who are we going to see first, and who are we going to see the most?
Aubrey and Aubrey.
Okay. All right. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I think Aubrey will have the most success, but I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, Philip brought up the point. I wouldn't be shocked if Taco is, say, a backup or like the 12th or 13th guy in Boston. I mean, a lot of this depends on what happens in free agency. So I could see him being like a second or third string big man and being on the roster quicker than an Aubrey Dawkins who may have to work the rounds. Who knows? But I would. Yeah. I'm going to stay with Murph and agree with him and go with Aubrey.
That's interesting. All right. Yeah, I think Aubrey has the best chance. I just hope that Aubrey finds the right spot. I feel like that's going to be the most important. Taco, I don't know. It's just going to depend on how he develops. But even at 7'6", there's so many different things you can do. He made a lot of guys made the case about Boban, right? But I feel like he could. People are going to laugh, but he could be a sort of late era Sean Bradley, where he was. But
that doesn't work anymore.
Well, I mean, Sean Bradley was a shot blocker and a rim protector for most of his career, and that's pretty much what he was. He wasn't what everyone thought he would be coming out of BYU, but he is among the NBA's all-time leaders in block shots, and I think Taco could do the same. A little bit more athletic, I think, than Sean was, closer to Yao Ming, although he's not. I don't think he's quite Yao Ming athletic, but he's certainly athletic enough. All right.
He's not as skilled as Yao Ming either, I would say that. And,
not even close. And I would
mention,
too, that Boban at least did attempt 8 threes last year. So Boban is trying to shoot.
All right.
I do think BJ is fascinating because, Philip brought it up. I think there's a chance to be a third-string point guard at the Magic. I think Augustine and Fultz are definitely going to be on that roster. We don't know what you're going to get in Fultz. So they may carry an extra guard or two. Do they go after a free agent or not? Can BJ impress them enough? I would be surprised if BJ Taylor at least is not in Lakeland by the start of the season. Don't you think? Doesn't that just make a lot of sense from a business standpoint, marketing standpoint, if you're the Magic, to have a local UCF kid, a Boone kid, to play in Lakeland there and say, hey, go out to catch out the little bit of G League hoops there.
Well, it does, but are we thinking with our heart and not our head there? You know what I mean? I mean, I would have liked to have seen that about Jermaine Taylor too. I mean, they could have easily put Jermaine Taylor on that first Lakeland team, but they didn't, and so now he's in the Big Three. Of course, by the way, news on that front: Jermaine ruptured his Achilles playing Big Three, so we want to send out good thoughts and prayers to him for a speedy recovery on that, because that's a huge bummer. He's been fighting injuries his entire pro career. But back to what you were saying, Eric. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, remember, Copain, the former Cincinnati one who Philip talked about, was with Lakeland. So can BJ beat him out, let's just say, hypothetically, right? Like, can he – that's the difference. They do need point guard help, whereas the problem that Jermaine is, as good as he was, wing players are you can find wing players anywhere. And
they're a dime a dozen.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah, all right.
That would be my –
Well, we're going to be watching the NBA Summer League and keeping an eye on that. By the way, the dates for the Vegas Summer League, July 5th through the 15th. There are a couple of other Summer Leagues before that, but that's.
Want to do a Summer League draft, Murph?
Oh boy!
Don't even stop it. Stop it. I'm not having this. All right.
Let's do that first. And then let's draft programs that the AAC will add to be its 12 teams.
There you go.
I'm equally pumped about both objectives.
All right, we're not going to do that. Instead, when we get back, we're going to go back to the UConn thing. We're going to talk about which UCF teams benefit from it the most, and then we'll wrap up the show from there. This is the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Back after this. All right, back here at the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, just wrapping it up here. We're going to go back to the whole UConn athletic department, American Athletic Conference thing. And before we go, I just wanted to wrap this and talk about it a little bit more from the UCF side, because I don't think we actually 100% of the way dove in on this. But
which is really what matters the most.
Right. But we're going to go through the UCF programs and talk about which schools, we kind of touched upon it a little bit, but which programs will benefit the most from UConn leaving the American. And I think that a lot of this is sort of contingent on, who do they add, right? I mean, it's going to be, or if they add anybody. So this is kind of halfway down, but we're going to base this strictly on the idea of UConn leaving the conference. Is it addition by subtraction or not? I think we talked about how for UCF football, definitely for women's basketball, it's a net positive because now.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate on that.
Okay.
I mean, the obvious reasons why it's a benefit is because, hey, we can actually win the league now, right?
Right.
That's the obvious. But here's my question my counter to that, and devil's advocate. Number one, you just lost the one game a year if you get them at home. There were people actually come and attend the game, right? Like, would you agree? I mean, you were there, right, Jeff? I mean, they draw. They
do draw
people to that arena for
a
women's.
lot of really old people coming down from the villages to watch UConn.
Well, as long as they pay the tickets, you're getting money out of it. You know what I'm saying? So you do lose some income. I mean, that is significant that you lose a draw from that standpoint at the gate and then on television. I mean, UCF was on ESPN2 last year at UConn in the regular season. Are they going to be on ESPN2 in the future now without UConn? I'm not so sure. So I think that hurts from that standpoint of the league, as far as the gate and then the television coverage on that regard. And now I think the question is going to be from the league is this a one-bid league? Whoever wins the conference tournament gets the bid, or can they prove to be a multi-bid league without UConn? I think those are the questions moving forward for the league.
What do you think? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, no, I thought that would be Eric's point of view there. That without UConn, no one really. There was no reason to care about this conference. They were the only reason why they were even on national TV is because UConn was so dominant. However, I do not know if they're a two-bid league. I just don't know that. That really is more of a season-to-season proposition. But just in terms of this opens the door for UCF women's basketball to make the tournament probably on a more consistent basis, only because there's a better chance of them winning conference tournament. And wouldn't you want that opportunity to make the NCAA tournament a greater opportunity to make that tournament more than just, we're sort of riding the coattails of this sort of Goliath who's helping us sort of get name recognition because they are beating up on the rest of us, but we'll take it for the good of the conference. I'm not sure if that outweighs the specter of we actually now can make it to a tournament every year and have a real shot at winning the conference tournament with the automatic bid because we don't have this Leviathan standing in our way.
Suddenly, what this really means is suddenly the war on I-4 in women's basketball just got a dramatic kick into overdrive. That's what happened, I think.
Well, I agree. It's a great point. And South Florida and UCF, the good news is I think both programs know how to schedule out of conference, which I think becomes imperative. You have to schedule well out of conference. I think both schools do that. You're right. That game just goes up a different level in that rivalry, whereas now, you could be playing for championships. Not to disrupt. I mean, I think Cincinnati, we'll see. Maybe they can move up and challenge. I mean, who knows? I think there's so many questions after that it's too. But you're right, Jeff. To me, the American women's hoops now, from a two-bid league standpoint, it's probably UCF and USF because I think we trust both Jose Fernandez and Katie and Abe to take care of business. So I think that's where it's going to go to in that regard. Men's
hoops, Brian. I know you touched upon this a little bit, but net positive.
I mean, obviously, it depends on who they add. We've talked about Dayton and VCU. But we're just speculating right now. It's UConn or no one right now. So no, it's a net negative right now because if there's anything that UConn is nationally known for, it's athletically, it's basketball.
And we also touched upon baseball. Oh, I'm sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to add to it is a negative on a television standpoint too. I mean, UConn is a draw television-wise. Men's hoops, it's a good TV draw matchup there. The one thing I will counter with Murph's point though is, the Americans been good the last few years, despite UConn struggling. It's not like UConn has been at the top of the league. So the good news is, you're starting. You got Memphis. I think Memphis is the blue chip deal with Penny Hardaway, and then Sampson, what he's built at Houston. And I actually agree with Coach Sampson. Cincinnati's been the rock solid. Hey, they're dependable. Now we'll see if that continues without Mick Cronin. But I think that's your blood right there. And then Wichita State. I think those are your four teams that you got to build around, and then you hope that USF and UCF can sneak in there. I think USF's going to have a lot of high expectations this year. I think you hope Coach Dawkins, obviously, from the men's side, can certainly move up. And I will say this: I think Dan Hurley was going to turn around UConn. So you could argue UCF now it's one or two tougher games that you lose that maybe helps you get to a tournament more often. So there's two ways of looking at it. I think I agree with Murph at the end. It's a minor thing because you have to respect what that men's program is in college basketball. You can't say it's a positive losing UConn.
And I know this is kind of off the base, but since we're talking about the power teams in this conference, I will put, I don't know what the odds are, but there's sort of money line to USF being the second best team in this conference. I would probably bet some good money on that. I have a chance of doing that.
Ooh.
All right. Hot takery indeed. Baseball, I know you touched upon baseball too, Murph. Now I think this is also an interesting double-edged sword case where, okay, so you lose a quality opponent, but by the same token, you lose a quality opponent, and it could make your run to the championship easier. It also, obviously, again, depending upon whether or not they add anybody, it would at the moment at least balance out the schedule where you don't have that silly, open date weekend, where it's just a mess.
Let me ask you both this question, Murph. You start with you. Let me ask you this: if you're Greg Lovelady, and Coach Penders calls you, says, "Hey, Greg, we played every year. I know we're not in the same league, but I'd be interested in coming to your place for a 3-game weekend non-conference series. Do you do it?"
Yep.
Yeah, I would do it.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's the bad blood between UConn baseball and UCF baseball as there probably will be, say, between like Coach Abe and Gino Auriemma.
But right. No, I agree. But because here's the thing, UConn screwed baseball wise. If you're Coach Penders, you're going from the number 5 league in baseball to number 17.
Yeah.
So if you're UConn, you have to schedule really good non-conference. Otherwise, you're going to have to win the Big East tournament just to get into the tournament. Whereas in the American, you had a bit of a wiggle room. So they're going to be looking for quality games or a respected program. And if I'm UCF, Houston, I would still if they want, I would still add them to your home slate for the non-conference. Because here's the thing, I'm not saying you go to UConn because you have all the leverage. UConn needs to find those quality games.
Yeah.
And so I would do that.
Well, plus, they're more than likely going to be looking to come down south either. Or down south anyway, so yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I think for baseball, obviously it does hurt them, but the good news for baseball, everybody in the league except Memphis has proven that they can be an NCAA tournament team. Cincinnati did it this year. You just assume they maybe improve. I think there's you assume if you're the league, UCF, USF bounces back up to being a tournament team. They both have been capable of doing that. We know the ties. My question is, the wild card in this is, I think Wichita State and Tulane are ones that need to step up, Murph. They have tradition. They're capable of making the tournament. Tulane has struggled since Prince, their head coach, left for Texas. And then Wichita State has struggled. They just got rid of their coach. But I think you have the ability to still be a top 5 league, but they need either Wichita State or Tulane to step up, don't you?
Yeah, I get that. This is really what this is about. Like, you lose a really solid tournament team. So to offset that, you need your other teams to step up. Man, that's not rocket science. That's what they're going to need. That's what they're going to need.
Softball, Eric Lopez. Oh, go ahead.
UConn was a top 30 RPI team in baseball the last 2 years, and we've mentioned 6 out of the last 10 years in the regional. So. This is not some they're okay. No, they're really good.
Yeah,
they're
really
good.
good.
Although they're going to be hurt by going to the Big East. If I'm Penders,
yes.
I'm livid. That's a terrible move because you're screwed. You're never going to host ever again.
Anyway. UConn softball, Eric, last year was 21-29, 8-13 overall, and that seems to be about where they end up every year, isn't it?
Correct, and they're usually 100 or worse, probably even closer to 150 on a given year RPI wise. So I think coaches inside the league would say hallelujah, because that's 3 less games that hurt your RPI. The American currently is a 7-team league, which is what they were from the last, I believe it was 2015 through 2017 before Wichita State arrived. Because what happened was when the American first started, Temple had softball, but dropped softball after 2014.
They dropped baseball too, by the way, also.
Correct. Valid point. And so what softball did is they had the regular season champion gets a bye into the semifinal, and you would have the 2 versus 7, the 3 versus 6, and the 4 versus 5. They added Wichita State to go back up to 8. Now they're at 7. Assuming they don't add anybody, I think they're thrilled. They're the biggest benefactor because Connecticut unfortunately did hurt them from an RPI standpoint. And I think the American, if anything, benefits from that. And then now it creates an extra weekend where you can have a bye, or you could schedule somebody extra during your scheduling. So I actually think it's a big win for the league and for UCF.
Those are the exact same things that you could say about UConn volleyball as well. I just wanted to get there because last year they were 7-11 in the league, 15-16. They're always kind of middling, in the league.
And I think.
Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
I will say this. I think you would agree. UConn women's volleyball and softball is if you're them, you're probably happy you're going back to the Big East because you have a more realistic chance to compete.
You're definitely happy about that if you're them.
Right? Let's be fair about it. I think I think softball they'll benefit from being in the Big East, and as volleyball would as well.
Two interesting cases that we're going to talk about. Men's soccer. UConn traditionally a very good men's soccer program. They finished in fourth this year. UCF and SMU. It's usually SMU, UConn, with UCF kind of a relative newcomer to success in the men's soccer arena in the American. Net positive or a loss for UCF with UConn leaving the league?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. UConn's a good men's soccer program, and I don't know, Jeff, you were there last year. Don't you feel that UCF UConn men's soccer was kind of developing a little rivalry there? I mean, the last 2 years they played in the tournament. They had UCF beat them 2 years ago in Dallas in a controversial goal that wasn't counted or whatever.
Yeah.
Last they played a wild game in Orlando, which UCF won. They're a good soccer program, so I can't say that helps the league, right? I mean, it doesn't help them.
I feel like UConn certainly helped elevate the American as a whole in men's soccer much more than they detracted from it. I think that as other programs got better, UCF is on the upswing, South Florida is on the upswing. I think those are the loss of UConn kind of hurts the American in terms of men's soccer, and that they're going to have to be very careful about who they add for a sport that's kind of a growth sport right now in college. As far as women's soccer is concerned, UConn has never really been much of a threat. Last year they were 4-14. Last year 2-7.
They were early on. They were actually a pest to UCF. Then they've dropped off, so it's hard to. That's a hard one to handicap because I don't know which UConn. They've had success, but they've dropped off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tricky one. But I think the league women's soccer has more depth. When you think of a Memphis and a South Florida and UCF, let's be honest. In women's soccer, that league at best, you're going to be a 2 to 3 bid league anyway. So I think those are your flagship teams as far as women's soccer is concerned. I think men's soccer is hurt a little bit more because I think UConn is a tournament team usually. Now the men's soccer, where are we looking at, Jeffrey? What is it, South Florida, UCF?
Well, in men's soccer, you can't forget about SMU.
SMU.
SMU is a real power. I mean, they mean business in men's soccer. There's no doubt. So, all right. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see. More news is going to come out in sort of the aftermath of this, you tend to think. But it's happening. UConn is out of here.
I will say this. Obviously, football, you don't miss anything on the field. I do think it could get tricky because if they don't add anybody, they're probably going to have to get rid of divisions, and it could get a little bit of a trickery road to get to the New Year's Six bowl game if UCF. So that could hurt you in that regard. But at the end of the day, I mean, nobody's really going to lose sleep over,
right.
UConn. Although we'll miss the conflict trophy.
Yes. And you know what? I'll miss that. I'll miss the media spread for the UConn football game, which was really solid. The press box was nice. Yeah, it was very nice.
Rentschler Field's nice. It's in Hartford. Not bad. They did a lot of work to it.
Yep. The other thing, by the way, this is going to be interesting after this year is where does the women's basketball tournament go? Because they've been at the Mohican Arena forever. So do they just push that and put that in Fort Worth where the men's is going to be, the next 2-3 years, Murph? They're going to be in Fort Worth?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm curious if the women just go ahead. They just put the women right there in Fort Worth as well.
Dude, Orlando's going to try and bid on that hard, man. That's going to happen. So. I mean, we're probably going to see that happen probably the next 3 years. Who knows? I would not be surprised to see that. So, all right.
I'll tell you what, Murph, your trip to Rhode Island in about a month for Media Days just got a lot more interesting, though, after this week, doesn't it?
Oh, boy. I can't wait to ask Mike Norvell what team he thinks is going to join the American for football.
Well, you get to ask Colin Sherwin that. He's trying to kick people out of the American. He's trying to kick ECU and Tulsa out.
I know.
I'm like, slow your roll, dude. Come on now.
Yeah, people thinking like, hey, we got UConn out of here. Why don't we just do some house?
Yeah, let's just start booting teams out on Moss.
Yeah. And then who do we want to invite in place? Like, Texas.
Yeah, Texas. Let's invite Texas and Oklahoma.
Florida.
Let's do it. Let's just kill the Big 12 right now while we can. Why not?
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap this thing up. Murph, what you got going on this week?
Still preparing for that trip to Rhode Island in a couple of weeks. Other than that, see what comes down the wire. Maybe they'll have a surprise for us. Maybe Old Dominion will send out a quick tweet hinting at a possible agreement with the AAC. I know your mouth is watering.
Oh, let's go Monarchs! How about you, Eric? We're doing the top 25 games. We got one up earlier today. We're gonna have another one up. We're gonna just roll them out day by day, aren't we now?
Yeah, we're gonna get us through the summer. It's celebrating the UCF athletic year, maybe the best athletic year of all time. Danny White, who, by the way, I think was released. Brandon was tweeting about it. I guess we now know he's like the top 20 paid athletic directors or something to that extent.
Top 15 paid salary for an athletic director in the country, worth every penny. Boy, he is really hurting the brand, isn't he?
So as a tribute to him for the great athletic year and his vision for top 20 being, this quote about being a top 25 athletic department, we're doing out the top 25 games of the year throughout the UCF athletics. What number are we at right now, Jeffrey, you said?
We got 23 coming out tomorrow.
All right, cool. There you go. So I'm sure you and Murph and Jeff will throw your commentary on Twitter every time one of those matchups comes available. I'm sure Murph will be counting how many of the top 25. That's the big question. How many of my top 25 was Brian Murphy actually at? Will be fascinating.
I forgot the one you had for 24, and I remember that was a really good one. That was the women's soccer game against Florida, where they played the first half and then it got washed out because of the lightning, and they ended up, because they didn't hit 70 minutes, they had to replay the game when UCF was up 3-0 and then come back the next day, nothing right at the beginning. I'm like, this is crap. And then UCF wins 3-0 anyway. But yeah, that was, I forgot all about that one, man. Yeah, that's a good find. So, all right, so we got that.
Number 24 on my list. Yep, that was 24 on my list. Number 25 was the UCF self-destruction of SMU, where Taco Fall had a double-double, and they beat him by 1 billion points, which Murph was at.
Right. So we got that. We got plenty more coming. I'm doing some work on some football-related stuff in the offseason as well coming up, too. So, all right. That'll do it for the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Don't forget to follow us at UCF_Banneret and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And, of course, as always, at blackandgoldbanneret.com, SB Nation's home for your UCF nights. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast if you don't already, wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free, to keep up on all the latest in UCF sports news. So for Brian Murphy and Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. I'll catch you next week.